Come on, everyone. Alright, I need y'all to sound a little bit more lively. I know it's hot and our energy is drained, but we're here for the people, right? Alright, for those of you who are, I see some new faces. For those of you who are probably meeting me for the first time, my name is Fidelis. I am chairman, co-founder of our organization, the New Vanguard, and this is part of our community discussion series. We try to do these consistently about once a month to talk about things that we feel are relevant to our community, touch on different issues and perspectives, and just trying to bring the community together in order to raise our consciousness, become more aware and informed about different topics that relate to the issues which we seek to address. New Vanguard is an organization that we started a couple of years ago, and our focus is really grassroots organizing, grassroots education, really focusing on our local issues. There's a lot going on in the world, a lot going on in the country, and a lot of times these things can feel so big that you don't know where to start. But as we try to remember, all politics are local and everything is political. So that is the way in which we try to approach things. So to get us started, I ask my favorite question. Do y'all feel powerful today?
Yes,
All
sir.
right, repeat after me. All power to the people.
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 All right. So today, the discussion that I want us to have is a discussion about class consciousness and class solidarity. Um, this is something that I feel is important because I think that as we are sort of seeing what's going on in the country, and a lot of people are seemingly for the first time becoming aware of realities that different communities have been really having to live with for as long as this country's been around. Um, I think that it's important that people kind of start to put these things into context. One of the big sort of buzzwords anytime you talk about politics is the economy, right? And money and people's standard of living and quality of life. And a lot of times, I think what's interesting about these conversations is that you sort of find people having these conversations in a context that you can sort of tell they're not really aware about what their relationship to this economy is, and their relationship to class and wealth and their access to it, right? And so, class consciousness, I think, is something that uh, those of us who do a lot of this grassroots work, and those of us who are trying to organize our communities and trying to build initiatives around bettering the lives of people in our communities, I think it's important that the people that we're trying to work with be first of all aware of what their relationship to all of this is, all these different moving parts of the system. So the way I think I want to sort of do this is, gonna be a discussion. I'll probably talk a lot, but um, feel free to interact and put in input at any point, ask questions or anything of the sort. But the first thing I sort of want to put out there is, does anyone want to give us a definition of class, of what that means when we talk about it? And it can be, as specific or as general as your knowledge lends itself to be. Don't be shy.
I think about it as people who share the same, mostly economic circumstances as yourself.
Right.
That is, yeah, yeah, how we earn our money, what we can rely on in the world, where we're coming from. But yeah, I won't go beyond that.
Yeah.
What else you got?
Anybody want to add anything to that, or maybe offer a different perspective if you have one? So for us in the New Vanguard, we label ourselves as a scientific socialist organization. And I know socialism has been in the news a lot lately, so hopefully you have a positive relationship to that term. But in this, when you think about socialism and in the socialist context and what class means, a lot of times class, as Luke stated is, people would think of it first and foremost as your access to capital, to wealth, to money, resources, but also thinking about it in terms of your relationship to labor as well, right? A lot of what shapes class is your relationship to labor, and there are a lot of terms I could get into that are super complicated and come to these different things. But to kind of keep it simple, right? You have everybody's familiar with the term working class, right? So these are the people who are the workers of the economy, the ones that are providing the labor to this economy. And then you have your uh, if we're talking, within the capitalist system, you have the capitalist class, which is usually the ones who own the means of production and who control the means of production, and typically also hoard a lot of the wealth and the profits that are produced by the working class. Now, does anybody want to kind of break down means of production if you're familiar with that phrasing?
Yeah. Um, the means of producing society, like commodities, the things we use, the spaces we inhabit, how humans produce and reproduce, basically society.
Absolutely. Right. Uh, so within different kinds of economies, you'll have different sort of means of production. And so that can look like, who owns the factories, who owns the mines, who owns the, whatever these things are, that, as you said, help to produce and reproduce society and different things within it. So I think one of the most interesting things for me as an organizer, and especially coming back to Milledgeville as I did 2 years ago, one of the first things that was important to understand was sort of like what is the demographic breakdown in terms of like economics of the city and the county. Um, does anybody know what the poverty rate in Milledgeville is according to the latest census data?
I've heard as high as 40.
Yeah, that's
That's
39, 40% in the city. In the county, I think it's around 26, 27%. So that's a very high like poverty rate.
Wait, like compared to the national, do you know?
I want to say the national poverty rate is somewhere between.
I think it's much lower.
Yeah, it is between. I think the national poverty rate is between somewhere between 10 to 20%. It's not nowhere near. Yeah, around like 15. I want to say. Someone can fact check that. But definitely not 40. Definitely not 40. Uh, I want to say the state is somewhere a little lower than that. So we're definitely above average across many many spectrums. Um, and the reason why it was important for me to understand that is when we're talking about doing grassroots work and working with communities to improve quality of life, it's important to understand what their barriers to access are. Whether that be access to jobs, healthcare, food. One of the first things that I wanted to focus on was like food insecurity, which is why we started the community garden initiative that we've been doing for a couple of years. And a lot of times, when we're trying to address these problems, we run to the issue of taking on solutions that aren't really solutions, right? Solutions that on the surface may seem effective, but when you're thinking about long term, how we're addressing this problem long term, um, they really don't hold in that sense. Um, and I think that's part of the reason why, when we talk about like what our political or economic philosophies are, I personally don't believe that we can continue to exist under a capitalist system and really solve a lot of these issues. Right? When we talk about issues like poverty, once you really begin to understand capitalism, you understand capitalism cannot exist without poverty. So you know, a number of people are always going to have to be poor in order for our system to hold, and that really comes from if we want to sort of look at the history of the development of our capitalist system, it really started with the transatlantic slave trade, right? And understanding that this was a system that was built on a group of people being forced to provide free labor to really build up this economy. And so then we have to ask ourselves, when they say, slavery was abolished and all these things, well, how does a system that was built on free labor, how does it maintain these classes that were built, right? How does it maintain the structure that is so integral to how this country functions? And so you begin to look at things like, I'm sure everybody's aware of the 13th Amendment and how that led to the creation of the prison industrial complex. But not only that, but even looking at, um, the with all this discussion around immigration and looking at how much labor immigrants, how much almost free labor, a lot of immigrants are providing to this country and to our economy, right? And so you begin to realize that there's a sort of the system never changes; it just adapts, right? It just adapts to the internal and external forces that force it to have to shift and move and all these things. And one of the things that I always say is that we really have to understand how sophisticated of a system that capitalism is. It's something that it can, if you're not very aware, it can make you think that progress is happening when it's not. A lot of times, right? And so I want to stop there and sort of ask a question to everyone, as you have obviously everyone here has attended because you have some interest in understanding class consciousness and things like that. So, but what is your understanding of your positioning within our current economic system? Like, how have you come to understand yourself and your relationship to it?
I think I mainly do like non-profit stuff, so I would consider like reproductive labor, not necessarily like productive. I'm not like creating chairs or tools that people use. It's more so like engaging in conversation. I work at the Commission Equal Opportunity Commission, so it's a lot of like workers who've been discriminated against and seeing how we can do something about it. I'm not very optimistic about it. Like it ultimately results in like being able to sue a company, but it doesn't really change like the fundamental aspect of how discrimination operates, how corporations continue, kind of those forces in those spaces. But I do think like in the U.S. we have a lot of reproductive laborers, like especially service labor and things like that. So I kind of see myself fitting into service. And there's, a common refrain that service labor is not as valuable or meaningful as like productive labor, like working in a factory and things like that. But I think our working class here there's a large contingent that is just in service labor. Whether that's like baristas, I think teachers to an extent are also reproductive labor, offering a service less than like producing a commodity that's physical. And I think one of my main things is like how can you speak to those who are in these different places and unite on the basis of like in some way, some shape or form you're being exploited if you're selling your labor. Like if you don't own the institutions or enterprises you operate within, you're selling your labor because you have no choice. Like there's forced labor disappeared allegedly. Like we don't go sell our labor to some corporation, some business, some institution, then we starve. There's not like there's enough programs or even significant programs to like maintain or house people or care about people like the poverty like speaking of poverty rates. So I think for me it's like definitely service, definitely reproductive, and definitely like trying to figure out how I can use any position I'm in, especially in that space that's so connected with workers, to forward a like push towards class consciousness. But I mean there's limitations because it is working for the government, so I can't be like, let's do a revolution, guys. It's mostly like that's interesting. Have you considered speaking with your other workers, trying to organize? But there's limits to that. So I think in my job I'm very limited, but with like community organizing, I feel like you can actually express more like a class conscious position on things.
Um, yeah, it feels like we like valorize a very small segment of working class. And like, yes, some mythical at this point factory worker is like what we're trying to relate to for that. And for me, and at the same time, like I feel like I come out of, I guess I'd say that a professional class, or a professional view of that. But for me, class consciousness, it brings to mind the realization that we're all, I'm not free of selling my labor. And in fact, that's the only thing I have as well. And so class consciousness is about realizing that actually that dependent on wage labor is almost all of us. Uh, and the ways in which, in trying to carve up the class so that we don't have a mass feeling of all being in it together for that, we have all these things of like being your own manager, right? You're working three Uber and Lyft, but you're an independent contractor about to make it rich. You're about to be one of those who is, maybe you're also renting out a back room in your house. Great. Now you're in the landlord class. You're not in the wage earning class.
Right.
So for me, class consciousness is like all the ways that this has been sliced and diced up. No, we're all in this not owning our ability to be free.
Absolutely. Anybody else want to share?
Information, I feel like is a big thing. Like I'm not from Baldwin County, I'm from Greene County, and I knew like high school seniors that were like on the sixth grade reading level. So like, what opportunities are they given to better themselves and to better the community if they're not aware of it? Like kids that never been to Atlanta when COVID and everything happened, they were still doing bus routes so kids could have lunches. So how are they able to better themselves in their community when they don't even have access?
Anybody else? So yeah, so a lot of what everyone is sharing is an understanding of your interests when it comes to your positioning, right? And I think that one of the most insidious tools of the capitalist system is that it sort of tricks you into believing that your boss, your landlord, the millionaires and billionaires and politicians of our society have the best interests of the working class at heart. Um, and to Luke's point, everybody is what's the quote? Everyone is just an embarrassed, a temporarily embarrassed millionaire, right? Everybody believes that if they work hard enough, and then you go and get all the education in the world, uh, that eventually you will become,
Don't tax the wealthy because that's
right?
about to be me.
Because exactly.
I was just gonna say, and one reason, we think that is because we assume we live in a meritocratic system, like it's fair,
Right.
that we have equal opportunity. So if you just apply yourself, you're gonna go up the ladder just like Jeff Bezos, just like Elon Musk. So leave everything the way it is because I'm just pre-rich right now. Like I know I'm gonna get there, so just leave it alone. But people, in my opinion, don't understand that that's against their class interest. Like because the system itself is a problem, not the individual person.
All right. And I think one of the most important things to understand about that mindset is that a lot of that propaganda is rooted in racism as well. And this is why it's important to also understand the intersections of race and class, because the only reason why, for example, a poor white man would come to believe that a billionaire white man has his interests at heart is because at one point in this country's history, um, they had to codify racism into slave codes, right? So that white people wouldn't join with the enslaved Africans in rebelling against the slave owners. And so they had to, Lyndon B. Johnson has this quote about, if you tell a poor white man that he's better than a black man, he won't notice that you're picking his pocket. And that's a lot of what's happening and what has happened throughout the history of this country. And a lot of times, you know, uh, capitalism uses racism as a tool to build class traders within the working and poor class. You look at the history of the labor movement, and a lot of the progress that could have been made in the labor movement was betrayed by racist white workers who could not find themselves in solidarity with the same working class folks that just happen to be black. All right. But also, you know, capitalism using racism as a way to keep a lot of people desperate enough to the point where, okay, sure, if you have this company that usually hires mostly white factory workers and they decide to go on strike, well, we know that we have this group of black folks over here that we've never given jobs to, and then we can now say, okay, because our workers are striking, we're gonna go get this, group of black people over here and hire them temporarily to replace our labor force that we've just lost to the strike, right? And then that creates this sort of like uh, animosity between now the striking white workers and the black folks who are just looking for a way to survive that are now being sort of used as a part of this ploy by the employees and the owning class. And so you see a lot of this throughout American history and the way in which racism has played into class betrayal, has played into breaking class consciousness. And I think that that's important because a lot of times, when we talk about sort of these mindsets and where they come from, uh, it's not just a generally just like aspirational mindset that exists within capitalism, but it's been specifically cultivated so that people, they'll look at an immigrant family or a black family and say, well, you're just taking advantage of the system. You're just, this, that, and the third. I remember having a conversation with somebody one time, and they were like, the middle class is like the worst class to be a part of because you're too rich to get any to be like benefit from any social programs, but like you're too poor to, really like feel the or really enjoy like the spoils of your labor. Uh, and it's funny to me because you see a lot of that where people who think themselves to be middle class, uh, who a lot of times like look at poor people and say, these people are they're exploiting the system, right? Oh, why can't we get those benefits? And at the end of the day, it's like you're like, do poor people make the rules? One, that's the question we have to ask ourselves, right? Like, who makes the rules? Who designed this system? Are you gonna blame somebody that ultimately has suffered under this system more than have benefited for being able to get a few I mean, even if they, let's just say they were taking advantage of a program here or there, like what is that in comparison to the suffering that they have had to endure, that has kept them poor? But secondly, are they the ones you should be angry at, right? Because what does that really say about your perspective on the system and on them? It's like you're fine with the system, you're just not okay with them benefiting from it, right? Because there's lots of rich people that I mean, the only way they get rich is taking advantage of the system, right? And if your belief is that, well, yeah, if you work hard enough, you can be rich. Well, sometimes part of that hard work is exploiting parts of the system and other people. So there's a lot of times when people have these like mindsets, there's no consistency in the way in which they understand it. And that's why class consciousness is so important because you ultimately have to understand who you have more in common with, right? A lot of us, we often say we're only one emergency away from being homeless, right, or being in absolute poverty, and that's a very real thing. Um, and so, in understanding all those things, then you have to start to talk about what are the steps forward, right? How do we begin now to implement our understandings of class consciousness towards solutions? One of the things I talked about earlier is like one of the things about this country and just a lot of capitalist countries that you notice is like a lot of solutions that they implement are solutions that only work well enough to make people feel like they're helping without really addressing the root cause of the problem. A couple months ago, um, I was at a not a couple months, it was earlier this year. I was at a conference workshop about environmental justice, and one of the things that I remember someone saying at this conference, they were presenting on like climate change and how fast climate change is accelerating, we started talking about like what does the solutions look like, and one of the things that they said was that one of the realities of uh, addressing climate change is that the same companies that contribute to the problem are going to be the same companies that are going to benefit from the solution. And I said, well, that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. If we're talking about what a real solution is going to look like, all right? If we have, you can't tell me that, let's take gas companies, for example, right? You can't tell me that the same gas companies that are contributing to a large part of the problem, how is it that we're going to say what we're doing as a solution if they're also going to be the ones benefiting from it? Because then what does that say about the solution and whose interests is it really serving at the end of the day? Right now you have communities that are being destroyed by gas pipelines and that are being moved around for fracking and extraction, and not just in this country but around the world. And so if we're saying that, well, this same company now is going to benefit from the solution, what does that solution look like for those communities? Because environmental justice is not just about like repair to the environment, but also to the people who have suffered the consequences of what has been done to the environment. So we're talking about indigenous communities, poor communities, black communities, right? So one of the things that we're talking about is this technology called direct air capture. So essentially, they build this big kind of building that sucks carbon out of the atmosphere. And so it's like if you're telling me that a company that currently is running a data center is also going to build our direct air capture facility, where do you think that facility is going to go? Right? It's going to go in the same communities that are being destroyed by data centers. We're saying that okay, we're going to make this switch from oil pipelines to gas pipelines, but it's going to be the same company that's going to be putting in these pipelines and benefiting from them. Where do you think those same pipelines are going to go and how they're going to be, you know, um, put in? If we're talking about affordable housing, I mean, how do the same companies that are creating a housing problem, how are they going to be the ones to also solve the housing problem and still benefit? Right? It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So, um, so that's another thing to think about, as we're walking things forward and thinking about solutions. And so I want us all here to kind of reflect on again our own position in the system. And all of us, to my knowledge, none of you are billionaires. Um, but think about what some of your challenges are as it comes to your positioning in this system. And then think about what some of the presented solutions that you've been told, well, this is what's going to help. And then think about what you feel is an actual solution to that problem. Um, and I want you to just kind of share whether or not you feel that these issues have been adequately addressed. And then what does it look like to you for these issues to be addressed in a way that is class conscious, um, and is in solidarity with people that are in our class that share our interests and share our struggles.
Yeah. I think I definitely don't get paid enough. So that's rough. Because there's rent and there's gas, there's like life.
Mm.
And one thing I've heard that people put forward that I used to be like, okay, is the universal basic income stuff.
All right.
And I was like, wow, that sounds good. Like everyone's getting some money. But then someone contextualized it that right now the money we make is still going to some proponent of the capitalist class, like some grocer, some gas company, some whatever. And so that would just be another step in money going towards them and never actually coming back to benefit us. With like an extra $1,000, I still pay for my rent, I still pay for groceries, and everything getting more expensive. That's just more money going away from me. It's not like I'm building a fund of wealth or that could sustain that type of process. Because wealthy people who exist right now aren't wealthy because they worked hard historically.
Right.
They're either some type of beneficiary of slavery, colonialism, genocide somewhere or here. Like that's how that kind of sets up these generational wealth things. So when I hear that rhetoric of like, we can keep the capitalist system, but maybe get a bit more benefits, like those benefits aren't even real benefits. And one, to keep the capitalist systems that exist in the United States, you have to kind of accept imperialism abroad, like what we're seeing in the Congo and Palestine. Like none of those sound great. So I think the bare minimum, which is oh my gosh, I always feel kind of weird saying it. But I mean, we live in times of fascism, so I do still think it will have to be like some type of socialist revolution of overturning the current state of things, the current fascistic imperial colonial state of things, and implementing an actual, and this is a term some people are like hesitant about, but it does have the word dictatorship, but dictatorship of the working and oppressed masses. And it doesn't mean like one person doing the decision making, but it does mean a class of people of the working class doing it. Because right now we live under a dictatorship of the bourgeoisie or of capitalists. And I mean, I think anything less than that, like reforms, are still beneficial to an extent. But the thing about reforms is that any later stage after the successful implementation of reforms, the class that is in power can just cut that, which is what they're doing right now with like voting rights, reproductive rights, like Loki, every general right that our people have spent the past few decades getting, they're just cutting them because they can, because they have the political, institutional, violent power to do so. So I think anything less than that is just not going to actually serve as a long-term solution. And I think with the climate collapse, that we should only really be focused on long-term solutions because we don't necessarily have like as much time as we previously did when we weren't as aware of the collapse of our literal climate.
I feel like solutions focused on community care are really important um, because all we have are each other often. And then like the most material solutions are like knowing your neighbor, taking food to someone who is sick, like holding each other up in the ways that we only can when we're in community with you. Um,
Yeah. I was gonna say I agree. Especially when you think about the climate crisis, if you have a flood at home, you know, your neighbors are gonna be the people who, like for me, I would go to like a tree falls on my house or whatever. Like in that moment of crisis, there's gonna be neighbors I would go to. So I think building that is important. But also, just in terms of a problem I face and think a lot about is aging, living alone and aging. What are my options for when I can't take care of myself? There are none. So, you know, that are affordable. So I think what is said a lot of times is, well, you can, you know, do assisted living or something like that. And it also makes me think of community care and, you know, things like that. But that's not really a solution because it's too expensive. And I know some of the places where we've gone to in terms of the housing group that I've been working with are housing that for seniors, and it, you know, it's just like I don't even know, but it's really, I think on some level maybe it's advertised as housing for seniors, and but then when you get there, there's no, it's like assisted living without any assistance.
No accommodation for care.
No, and I, the person who I know who was working there, we met her. I thought, so she's staff at the apartment complex. Yeah, and I think she's just taking it on herself to help people, you know, who are in that. I don't know. I could be wrong. I don't know. Maybe she was hired as someone to help. Okay, so maybe she was hired for that. But even when you think of assisted living, I've had family members who are in assisted living places that company will want to keep the person there when they shouldn't be. Like they need more help, but they're still in the assisted living place because what alternatives do they have? So I think, I don't know, I spend a lot of time thinking about that. And I've had I would say as a professor at a college, that's a middle class occupation. But I would say my roots are very working class, coming from a small farming community. in Northwest Florida. So, um, those are some things that I think spend a lot of time thinking about getting old. So, yeah.
Anybody else have something to share?
My mind also went to healthcare on both your comments. My wife is a state employee through the college here. Every time they get a an increase in their salary, it exactly matches how much is going to the health insurance company.
Yeah.
Um, and for solutions that look to the people who are already causing the problems, our attempts to uh, when I think about why many people in my slightly more comfortable space have to work, it's because of healthcare. Because we're all one emergency away, even when you're extremely well paid, without health insurance. Um, and and the fact that we said, you know, who should solve our health insurance problems? Our health insurers. Back in 2010, it didn't work out. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Um, yeah, and I think that everyone has hit on some very, very key points on building solutions to the problems that we have. Um, because one, our solutions have to be our solutions have to be community oriented for many reasons. One, you can't, part of the discussion is also talking about building class solidarity. You can't build class solidarity without community. You can't build class solidarity without understanding who is in your community and who shares your interests. And I think that one of the things that is one of the prominent, sort of points of capitalism is the individualistic aspect of it. All right. In the sense that we are sort of sold the idea that every single one of our inconveniences can be solved by having more money, right? If you have a lot of money, you don't need anybody. Um, which is funny because it's like all that really translates to practically that if you have more, the more money you have, the more labor you can employ to solve your problems. Not necessarily that you don't need anybody, but that you can buy people's labor, which now
you're probably going to want to do at a discount rate.
exactly. So it's like so it's like it sort of repackages the way in which the system works to make it sound a little bit more appealing so it's not as heavy on your conscience. But when it's like when you think about it, is instead of getting more money you could just build community and have these things happen without having to spend that the money that you would be earning anyway.
Like a lot of that's hustle culture too.
Right.
Like I know multiple people that have more than one job just because they need to get by, or they feel like they have to compete with their peers and like say, oh, I can do this, but like you don't have this many fans, or you're not iced out like I am, or whatever. And it's like they just want to be the best to say that they're the best, and so when they need help, they're not going to reach out to somebody. They're not going to talk to their community, even though it would be beneficial. So instead of like, it's like a crab bucket. Everybody wants to get to the top and they push others down, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah. And and part of that is that capitalism also makes us feel like we're only as worthy as the amount of labor we can provide. Either the amount of labor we can provide and then the amount of capital that we can extract as a result of it. And so again, if you're someone who doesn't have a lot of money, then you see your value in, well, I have to work as hard as I can. So all this labor that all this output that I'm doing is sort of what gives a lot of people their value until they feel like they start to get the reap the rewards of it in terms of money. Uh, and so, when we talk about things like, our elders, for example, right? A lot of the reason why our elders struggle is because there's not community that's built around them. And again, with capitalism, everything that could be solved with community gets replaced with a commodity or a service that is sold, right? So we don't have communities for our elders. What do? We build assisted living facilities. So now the kids have to pay for them to, go live in an assisted facility. We don't all these different things that I think the solutions are so simple, but yet for some reason people still haven't gotten over um, this idea that well, if I have to depend on somebody else, then it's not as appealing if I have to depend on my neighbor, for this service versus having enough money to just pay for it and I don't have to think about it, right? And I think part of that is also the fact that like if you're able to just pay for something, a lot of times you don't see the person that's providing that labor as human, right? And something that really struck me one time is when I read something that said that our like people's society's drive to want to like create all these like service robots. It's really like the DNA of our capitalist society still like yearning for slavery. Having something that will serve you and you don't have to see the soul in this thing. You don't have to like recognize, and that's essentially when you think about it, that's exactly what slavery is. It's like you see this human being is just the labor that it can provide, the wealth that it can create, the convenience that it can afford you, and so when that sort of becomes a marker for your uh, status in society, right? The amount of convenience you can have ultimately. When that becomes sort of a marker for your status in society, everybody's looking for how they can make their lives more convenient, right? So that's getting more money, having more machinery, having more laborers at your disposal. Whether that's a cleaning service or someone to come do your yard or this, that, and the third, right? All these things, and and that's not to like demonize, those services or that paid labor. But ultimately, is the reality of it is that, unless that, for example, unless that person is a freelancer, a lot of times you're hiring them through a company, right? So when we talk about like our relationship to labor, they don't own their labor in a real sense, right? Somebody else owns their labor and they're contracting that person's labor out to you. So that person doesn't own their labor, they don't own their time. And those are the two things that I think fundamentally kind of make up the human experience is like your autonomy over your body and your labor, and also the autonomy over your time. And a lot of us can't say that we have a whole lot of that because if you wake up tomorrow or, during the work week and decide, well, I don't feel like going to work today, your lights might get turned off, come end of the month. Um, I mean, and so, and then also like one of the other things I think about in terms of issues and supposed solutions, right? It's mental health as well. Mental health is something that is a big, big um, problem, and I therapy is helpful. Therapy is a very helpful tool. Let me preface by saying that. But I think within a capitalist society, therapy is much more of a band aid solution than it is a real fix for mental health problems. And I say that as somebody who one day had to wake up and realize that I don't have anxiety because anxiety is like a natural part of my makeup. I have anxiety because of the stresses that the system has put on me as a black man, as a working class man, as somebody who has to wake up every day and figure out how they're going to survive. There's a lot of anxiety that comes with that, right? So you have a lot of um, people, for example, that are poor, that are working class, that deal with anxiety, that deal with these stresses that bring on, as they compound, they make, your mental health worse, and they make the mental health problems that you're dealing with, they exacerbate those problems, right? And so a lot of times, the fix of that has been, well, we need to make mental health more affordable, mental health services more affordable, and it's like, yes, but no. Right? It's like there's only so much, a therapy session can do to fix the fact that like your boss is working you way harder than they should be, and you're only getting paid just barely enough to put food on the table. And then if you have kids, and then if you're living in a housing situation that is not, favorable, like a good housing situation, like there's only so much like your therapist can do about that because as soon as you leave that therapist office, you have to go right back into that situation that is causing that distress. And so, And then now, like, what's become even worse is now you have all these like every time I watch like a program or something, there's an advertisement for like better help or like all these like supposedly accessible mental health services, and it's like, oh, you can just talk to a therapist on your phone, and it's like that's not what I need. I need to be paid more. I need a better job. I need better living conditions. Um, so again, it's like solutions that sort of put the responsibility back on the individual to say, well, you have to go out and find the solution to these problems, but the system is just gonna continue to be the system, right? And so it's like now you have to make time to go to your therapist when you already didn't have time because you're working, God knows how many hours. Um, and so these are the kind of things that I think about where it's like a lot of these solutions that are being presented to us as fixes are only fixes that are meant to sort of like, for lack of a better way to put it, extend the shelf life of the people they're extracting labor from without changing the system. Right. So it's like we're gonna make you live a little longer, be a little healthier so you can work a little harder, but we're not gonna change relatively what your relationship is to wealth and access to resources or your control over means of production, right? So, like, okay, a worker today might have more access to social services or mental health services or whatever the case may be than a worker of yesterday, but generally, you still don't have more access to wealth. You still are not. You're like your economic mobility is still pretty much just a dream. Like most people, whatever class they're born into is the class they're gonna die in. Um, and so uh, another question I want to ask is, what are I think growing up we all have been like so unless you grew up in a very like radically conscious family, we all were sold a very rosy sort of picture of what um we could get out of this system. And I want to know, at what point did you figure out that the world was not what it was told to you it was going to be, and how did you react to that coming to that realization? I know most of us went on to become communists, but for everybody else. Yeah.
Do you want? Oh, when Trayvon Martin got murdered, and my parents had that talk with me, and then George Zimmerman didn't like nothing really happened, and he's still just chilling. I guess I was like, oh, so low key, we live in a world where the government doesn't really give a damn about my people, and I guess in general, like I think that was the first implementation in my mind and heart that if I wanted to see something different, that I have to like do something different from what I was seeing. And I mean, like I think in recent weeks we've seen so much murder of black people, especially black children, and just in general black people, that I think that's sitting on my heart a lot too. Like it's been really heavy weeks, and of course, like the murders of like ICE murdering people basically like once a day at this point, that just that kind of solidifies that we won't really be seeing anything coming from any of these institutions, whatever they may say, stage to stage, situation to situation, event to event. They maintain that their purpose is to serve capital, is to serve the preservation of settler colonialism, of imperialism, and that they don't really want to extend themselves at this point because there was the neoliberal era where they were like, we will give you nice words and maybe a few programs. And now we're in this reconsolidation of like that fascist tendency where they're not even playing to any illusions. They're kind of just being very upfront with it, which in some ways is beneficial for the development of class consciousness. In other ways, is pretty viciously horrible for a lot of people, especially those who are maybe more recently coming into the fact that we live under a dictatorship of capital. And I guess I'm not sure. Was there an end to the question, or I guess that was?
No, I mean that was. I have a follow up, but I just kind of want to. I kind of want to hear what people's thoughts on the first question, and I ask my follow up. But yeah, if anybody else, at what point did you realize that the world was not what you were told it was going to be, and how did that change your perspective on things?
Yeah, I like a similar like situation. I was like really young, and my dad
like made us like me and my siblings watch this movie like City Colors, which is like I don't know if anyone's heard it, but it's like
Yes.
a very hotel film. And it was like the first time, like of course, like a lot of it was like false. Like I'm not gonna give it to like Egyptology, but a lot of it's just like false. But like it was the first time like I had seen an alternative history in which Black people were like a part of history, and that like we had contributed, and that we actually had like power and like civilization or whatever. And so it's like from that moment on, like I became super like obsessed with it all, and like started going to school and like arguing with my teachers who were all like white, and they were like calling me like Malcolm X at school. They were calling me like a social justice warrior, like all this like crazy stuff. Like I was being called like a communist at school, like by my teachers who were like in their 50s and 60s. But like I didn't actually become like really class conscious and like understanding things until like I got older and like started getting involved in politics and started reading. Um, yeah, so shout out the books.
Yeah.
I think I like it took me a long time. I was probably after college before I was really aware of what was happening. And I think the thing that radicalized me more than anything was I visited the US Mexico border in 2018. And like we had conversations with people who were in detention centers, and then people like we talked to judges, we talked to ICE agents, we talked to all kinds of people. And it was like this really obvious light bulb moment of I think we get taught from like the Holocaust and from things that like if people see what's happening, they'll stop it. And I was like, oh, everyone knows what's happening. Like everyone is fully aware. And that I think that like blew everything up for me, where I just was like, oh, like everyone is fully aware and on board and consenting to the system that we're in. And then to me, that's what it's a decision. It's not like, oh, the bad guy is doing this. It's like, no, we are all doing that.
Yeah.
So I think that radicalized me more than anything.
Anybody else? Yeah, I would agree with a lot of that. And so my follow-up question to that is, because when we're sort of given this picture of the world that's painted to us, as we are growing up, we're also taught that certain people have our best interests at heart. Especially as we're talking about class consciousness, as we talked about earlier, a big part of it is understanding who actually has who actually is considering your interests, who actually is going to act in your best interest, and but also who you have opposing interests with, right? Who your interests don't align with, and who do you all believe has your interests, your best interests at heart when it comes to addressing the things that you deal with, the problems you deal with, the struggles and obstacles you deal with on a day-to-day basis, as it pertains to your class and your relationship to class? Like, who do you think has the best interest at heart in terms of solving those problems?
Me. I know who you think gonna solve them, but me. I mean, okay.
Yeah, I would say the people I met along the way. Unfortunately, I am one of those people where my family wasn't very supportive of anything. So I kind of had to have friends that were able to pick up the pieces and just be that person for other people too, as well as myself, and just try to stay strong in what I believe and to just keep going because shit's hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, on this question, my answer keeps getting smaller and smaller. Whenever we're in the room together, are they in the room with us right now? Compared to the first question, which is like, yeah, it's a little peeling back of realizing more and more until everybody is in the same boat with us. Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Everybody already knows.
Yeah, even though I got friends and they can help me, it's still up to me. In the very end, who got to do it?
Yeah.
I still got to do the work. That's all I'm saying.
And if there's anybody I have, I can rely on. There's so many people I can talk to
That's
and see.
most definitely. That part.
It's kind of silly, but my favorite Disney movie is Princess and the Frog. And I always remember her dad saying, "You can wish on a star, but it won't get you half of the way. You still have to put in the work to get there."
Right.
Halfway to a star, you really stuck out in the middle of nowhere.
Right. So I wanted to take that a little bit right further, right? So beyond than an individual perspective as a collective, in this room, if we had to, let's say we all, as we do often, a lot of us get together and say this is a common problem we're dealing with, right? Who do we think we go to solve those problems? Whatever problem comes to you, first problem comes to your mind as a collective, right? Who is it that we think as a constituency has our best interest at heart?
I don't really know anymore. I thought I did, especially when we had these meetings and there were so many people. Like it was so cool when we were talking about it, but when we started actually doing things, a lot of people were like, "Oh no," and that was a complete opposite of what I thought. So now I really don't know.
I think that's not really like a negative. I think that kind of just like reinforces who who has the capacity and who's willing to be down right now. And I think those people who leave will always have in the back of the mind in their mind like the meeting that you guys had and like can always come back when they're ready. I think some people like I don't think it's a bad thing if people jump on the bandwagon, but it's like there has to be someone to lead it. And I think like when you're asked that question, like who has their back, I think like the organizations that are built with the work class in mind, like the new Vanguard, I think are these types of organizations that people need to pour into and like build up so that more people can have confidence so that it can grow. But of course it's a long term process and it's not gonna happen like
Yeah, does anybody think they're politicians has their best interest at heart?
no.
I mean, serious question. Local politicians, state politicians, federal politicians. Anybody?
None of the above.
None of the above. Nada.
Mom Donnie question mark?
if only this was Mom Donnie's stand, but it's not.
I would say yeah. I can't. I wouldn't want to ever paint one group with one wide brush, no matter what that group is, and I can't speak for everybody else. And to say just because somebody's a politician or elected person they don't have a heart, I think that's a real wide brush. I don't know every politician, but I would never want to say that they don't. I would think some of them would. I'm optimistic in that aspect. You know, outside of the mere fact, I know politicians that do, and people, and all politicians are elected people. I consider politicians are people who are mobile and working in processes, not particularly maybe even running for office. So it's more of an umbrella term. Listen, my opinion. But I would never want to say this whole group ain't no good, that whole group ain't no good. It's like saying well, all black folks eat chicken. That ain't true. You know, not every, but so that I just add my 2 cents.
Okay. And I guess my follow up to that would be because I guess that's obviously a different perspective than a lot of people share in this room. So I want to specify I'm talking about elected politicians, elected representatives, and I guess I'll say what has made you more optimistic than a lot of us in this room when it comes to our elected representatives.
I don't know what the optimism is in the room, but I'm an optimistic person by nature. I'll tell anybody, my glass is never halfway full, halfway empty. It's always about to run over because that's my mindset. I agree with Treasure. You have to make a lot of stuff happen on your own. If I look at a system and say something wrong, I believe you got to put in that work to help make that system better. If it's a group or an area or whatever the case may be, I don't think it's always good to say, well, this group is horrible and put them down. Well, I say, hey, let me see what I can do to help make that particular better. But to be specific to your question, when I was in college, because I didn't ever vote till I was in college, I got part of a church that was really, really active. My parents was like most folks, they're gonna do what they want to do anyway. Ain't none of them no good. And then when I got to college, I met people that was beating the streets and working as hard as they can for the common good of common people. He said everybody in the world was doing it, but the people I was around was, and that showed me that I need to be part of the process. So I started voting. Back before I didn't know who I was voting for because nobody never educated me. They just said go. But with time I learned more. and participating more. And I think some of it depends on who your circle is, you know, and who you associate with, and who you see. Cause if you want to see only negative, you're gonna see that. If you look for positive, you're gonna see it. That's always yin and yang. It's always good and bad, and it's always some people trying to figure it out. I know some great people in politics. Be it elected or not elected, they do their best. May not always work out, they do their best. That's all you can ask for them. But if you ask me directly, it's because of my experiences, and I chose to get active on a variety of different levels from college up until now. So again, I would never paint all elected persons or politicians, because a politician ain't just a person in office, with one wide brush. It's like saying all black men are this or all white men are that. I don't agree with that. I mean, at least for me personally, I don't agree with that.
Yeah, and I guess what I would differ with you on that point is that I don't want to conflate. A politician is an occupation. A black man is a person. So I think that one, it's a bit of a slippery slope to compare those two.
I won't paint any any particular group with one wide brush. I feel like that. Whatever the separation or classification of that, you got a yin and a yang, a good and bad, and everything. Everything. And sometimes we're in the middle.
So, and I can understand that perspective as well. I think that a big part that also plays into a lot of the sentiments that are shared is just what our material reality is. I think that, and again, I think when people are speaking to politicians, they're not necessarily speaking to them as individuals, but as a class of people. And their politicians, broadly speaking, have not been a class of people that have been working in the best interest of the people. And that is evident by the material realities because ultimately they are the ones in power. They're the ones that are the decision makers. And I mean, who else are you going to? Who else ultimately holds the responsibility other than the ones who have the power to change the reality that people are in? And not to disagree with you on the aspect that people do have to put in the work. That is what our organization is about. That is what the work that we do is about. Is making people to understand ultimately that the only people that are going to have their best interests are them, and that the only way in which we move forward is through solidarity and through a shared class consciousness. Um, Now, I think that we have seen, especially for those of us who are younger in recent history, as of the last couple of years, ways in which the electoral process can be beneficial in terms of bringing into power people who really care about the people. But ultimately, I think that starts with the people, and that starts with grassroots work. I mean, what's been accomplished, for example, in New York, is not a result of people waking up yesterday and saying that they were going to start doing better. But I mean, people started at a grassroots, small level for work that's been done over decades, right? Same thing with the civil rights movement or any other movement that we've seen in the past is people putting in work over decades to be able to make those changes happen. And I'm gonna wrap this up. I'll get back to you. And to his point, the problem I think that a lot of us are starting to realize about the um, political class of our society is that they are largely a class that, in terms of stability, is very volatile, right? So, for 2 or 4 years, you can have a politician or a group of politicians that do things that may be, somewhat beneficial to the people. But then that can turn around the next 2 or 4 years and be a completely different situation. And so I think that some of the critique and some of the sentiment is not just towards the politicians as individuals, but also the political system itself. That as an elected person, I would hope you have an understanding of what the system as a whole, how flexible it can be. And I think that a lot of times, a lot of us who have sort of, you know, uh, lost the maybe optimism that you have is that we've seen and we've understood how inflexible this system really is. Right, as soon as it starts to move one way, it snaps right back to where it was before, and we've seen that many times. I mean, this is a cycle that has repeated throughout history, and so I think that a lot of what we're talking about here is uh, changing systems and not just changing politicians and people. And ultimately, if you are a politician, there is some role and there is some sort of complacency you have to have, within the system to be able to work within it. So I think that's where a lot of the shared sentiment is coming from. And I hope that if I didn't articulate exactly how you all felt, please feel free to add in. But I know you had something.
I was just saying another aspect you might want to put in when we talk about politicians and elected people. We forget a lot of time about boards. Boards run so much of our community, and they're not elected. And that's an aspect that we get looked over. I won't never forget. Maybe 2 or 3 mayors ago, I asked the question. He looked and smiled at me. He said, "Most people don't know about these boards, and they run all this stuff. It's unchecked power. You got a board from the air department, from the what do you call it, the airport to the housing to you got 3 different economic development authority boards that deal with the economic. That's their job to bring economics to this community. Most people never go to those meetings. I went to a meeting yesterday and I had never been to the registrars meeting, which is one of the most important boards. And they said nobody ever comes to our meeting. We can't believe y'all came. They don't even have a comment on that for public section. They decide and determine everything about election. Politicians don't actually have nothing to do with it. Now they do appoint those people for the most part. Some of them are appointed outside of that, but once they appoint it, they don't even have to respond to them. They don't. I mean, because it's an appointment for a term, 4 to 6 years. And a lot of times our boards don't get put into that conversation. And they're not particular politicians, but they're people with a tremendous amount of power. We concentrate on county commission, city council, and other representatives, but these are boards that are appointed locally and statewide and even nationally. Those things have unchecked power. They spend unchecked amount of our tax dollars, and nobody, without any type of what's name. I've been on one or two of them. It's amazing to get. So I just was adding the boards to your conversation. That's all.
Right, and to make another class conscious critique of that is, one of the problems with because I've heard this a lot, and from politicians who have previously attended our meetings is, well, nobody comes to the meetings, um, and then you talk to people and understanding the obstacles that are in the way of working class and poor people being able to be a part of the decision making process is that they simply do not have the time. Um, because one, and I'm not gonna sit here and act like these boards and commissioners or councils are necessarily transparent with when they're meeting and where they're meeting, and making this information accessible. But also, I also find it very um, interesting. Like there's been instances where you have a board and the city council or county commissioner meeting on the same day at the same time. You have instances where there'll be called meetings at 11 a.m. on a weekday and people are at work. So it's like if you're a working person, uh, and we know most people in Milledgeville and Baltimore County are working more than one job trying to get by. How exactly are they going to show up? And so you almost have to entirely rely on whoever is appointed or elected to these positions, and just kind of hope that they'll have your best interest at heart. Because to have to go out of your way to be involved and hold them accountable and hold their feet to the fire is also sacrificing your paycheck. And is somebody going to pick keeping their lights on and beating their kids over going to a board meeting or a city council meeting or a county commission meeting? I don't think so, right? And so that's why I, again, stress the importance of, class conscious solutions ultimately boil down to, changing the system because if we want people to involve, people have to have the capacity and the time to be involved. And, even in the work that we do, one of the things that I have to be very conscious of as, someone who directs a lot of our activities is the capacity of the people that want to be involved in what we do. Holding these meetings on Saturdays is a decision that was just made based upon the fact that, most people are probably working during weekdays. We can't hold these meetings during weekdays, so we try to hold them somewhere midday Saturday, and whoever can make it will make it. And thankfully we have had pretty decent turnout in most of our events and our activities. But also, I try not to hold it against anybody if they cannot be involved, because I understand the realities that they're dealing with. And so it is an uphill battle as it is, I would like to, and it's, for those who can be involved, I hope that they are. But again, when we're talking about a city that has a 40% poverty rate, county with a 26% poverty rate, no public transportation, people living, very far away from where the meetings are happening. It's very difficult. It's very difficult for people to be involved. And so, I think that we can say, well, nobody's showing up to these board meetings and this and the third. But I think the accessibility to these things also is a big part of the problem. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to synthesize something here, which is just that I hear the recognition that our power is in us, and wanting to be heard and to have those who are representing us be accountable to that. It is about more of us having a wider network of shared consciousness to absolutely attend these distributed places that decisions are made. And those people are humans too, who need to go home to their families. So some of that is going to happen at 11 o'clock.
Yep.
And it's hard for. We're convinced in the system that we don't have time for things, that we don't have the resources to participate in this, and that we don't need to do more than vote every 2 or 4 years.
Right.
And that's only a tiny bit of what we actually need to do to exercise power as people. But then in some way, there's still going to be meetings scattered throughout the month where boring and routine things are moved along, and either people that we like. I have a few people who have spent little times in politics, and as long as they're close to home, or I'm able to have a conversation with them, I feel like they maybe still represent some things, and I've had a nice conversation with John Ossoff, and he's not going to pick up the phone for me, and that's okay. Yeah, I mean, right, like go do your thing, and the system's going to make you be a particular thing that's no longer very responsive to me. And I'm just one little guy here, so you don't have to be. That's okay. But also, I'm not looking. The further away it gets, for much there. Other than our ability to have a larger and larger emanating out from each of our very individual selves and our immediate community to some larger flex.
I'm someone who I'm trying to be more involved and go to more city council meetings, and I went to the listening session or the city open meeting that they had last week about the curfew. Yeah. And they didn't care what anybody had to say there. It's like, there you go. There you go. Like, and people showed up, they talked, and it was abundantly clear that the decision had been made already.
Yeah.
And this was the first meeting. So like, how, you didn't care what anything. So that's, when I want to be more involved and go to the meetings and be present, but it doesn't feel like they care about that. And I think that's what a lot of people feel is, why should I go to the meeting? They're not listening anyway.
Right.
And so I hope that we can find ways of holding our elected officials accountable. Because like you said, people have to go to work. And so I'm going to take off work and go sit in a room, and they're going to not listen to me. Like, what was the point of that? So, and that decision, it's about, kids and teenagers, and whose parents of teenagers can come at 5 p.m. when their kids are off of school. Like, The whole thing was just kind of absurd. So I think that's why a lot of people feel that are not going to meetings because why?
Go here. Yeah.
Oh, I think one thing to remember is that just because the working class in general here doesn't have like class consciousness yet, doesn't mean that they don't have it. Like all of their little obstacles, like if it's a board, the electoral college, or whatever the fuck. I mean, whatever that. Like that's on purpose. They do it intentionally. They want it to be difficult. They don't want working class people who have maybe a vacillating, mystified consciousness, but still a somewhat foundational. I want at my interest as a working class person met.
Yeah.
They don't want that to happen. They don't want it to be possible. And so sometimes when it comes to I think that's the biggest limit of electoralism or legalism or any of that stuff, is that when you try to operate to the best of your ability within a system that they create, maintain, and enshrine, they're just going to find another thing. Like with ICE, and this is something I got from a lot of undocumented theory and all of that stuff, is that you can do everything right. You can try to get your papers, you can try to show up to the meetings or whatever. They're arresting people, they're detaining them from their fucking legalism meetings or whatever. They're murdering people who are stopping their cars like, oh, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, it does not matter because we live under a system where it's their rules that they make up that go. They have the violence and everything else to back it up. Then if we pretend like there's a certain version of ourselves or a certain way we can operate within their system that's going to lead to them not murdering us, not taking away our rights whenever they want, not enslaving our people, et cetera, then that kind of just makes it easier for them to continue doing it. Even though when it comes to building that class consciousness, I think the first level is to stop believing that they have any shared interest with us. Like we're literally witnessing the collapse of the climate, and they are still like, well, I don't really want to be poor though. So, and they wouldn't even be poor; they would just be slightly less rich. Like we have a trillionaire who exists in the same time when there are people starving and dying on the streets of Atlanta. I'm like, nah. And then there's multiple different genocides going on too. Like at the same time, trans genocide, genocide against black people, genocide. Like that sentence, I feel like there was a time in my life where I never thought I'd say that sentence. And now I feel like I say that sentence like once a day. Or I see it online, that sentiment once a day or multiple times a day. I'm like, why would I pretend like they are ever going to care? Also, just to beat this drum a billion times, this is fascism. Like this is active fascism. There's no if, when, maybe in a few years, maybe it's like right now. And the history of the United States is fascism. Like that's what settler colonialism is. That's what white supremacy is. It's that consciousness of class collaboration, etc. Then I'm like, if we continue playing this line or putting out these lines that have historically and currently not worked, it's in many ways a disservice to kind of being alive right now. Because I don't think I know that they cannot win because fascism is unstable, et cetera, revolution, all that stuff. That is still true. But also, we're here right now with a level of consciousness that if we don't advance or do something with, then it's just not going to happen with us. And I'm like, that's ridiculous. I think most people read too many damn books, watch too many videos, attend too many meetings to still not be taking the lessons of it's not going to work. Like Stop Cop City is the best example in recent history for me. There was the referendum, there was et cetera, and all of those failed. And so today when I see people like, oh, sign my petition because we're going to get a referendum going, I'm like, how is that something you're doing right now? And, to a certain extent, it's the responsibility of those who are conscious of that to make those lines to struggle in that way. But on a personal, emotional level, I'm like, so all those people who got brutalized by cops, all those people, Tortuga got murdered, and there was nothing in that entire event, scenario, situation that you could take away, and you're still doing the same things that we failed at, that people gave their lives for. Like, there's a dissonance there for me. So I think when it comes to class consciousness, that needs to be something we put all our effort into and share and spread and whatever. Because while we're not doing that, they're actively consolidating their class. They're what they're going to do. Because all these Democrats might do something. They are taking a back seat because it is not their turn anymore. They're going to continue servicing the fascists. They're going to keep saying, oh, Lindsey Graham, who's a genocidal freak, just died, but I'm Cory Booker. I'm a Democrat, and I'm really sad that he's died, guys. Like, this is like, what the hell is that? So I think that's my foundational position, is that while we're not doing stuff, they're doing everything they can to sustain their dying empire. And it's dying, but they're doing everything they can to keep it. And that's it. That's where we start. And I think that's something I think more people need to get to. And that's one of the things that I want to ensure I put effort into, is helping people get there.
Yes, on the state and
Back to like specifically local politics, which I do think are important, but I think that there's a big problem with like accessibility. You know, if you want any amount of information about the ways in which our government here is spending money, you better have a large chunk of money and a large chunk of time. And you know, I have hundreds of pages of expenditures from elected officials in the city, in the county, people who were in office and aren't now, people who are still in office, and I've been in a position to where I have the time to go through those, and they're concerning. And so I think a lot of people share that same feeling of like, what is the point of going to these meetings to talk for 3 minutes when you clearly can see which interest they're serving? You know, there is no point for somebody to get up meeting after meeting after meeting and talk about the same thing, harp on the same problems, because there's no expectation that anything will be done with that, because we have seen how they've operated in the past and how they're operating currently and who they're serving in the past and who they're serving currently. And I think that I mean, it's not just applicable to Milledgeville. I think it's applicable to the county, to the state, and across every state and at like the federal level. So I think that that's kind of where a lot of people lose hope in what their elected officials are going to do.
Yeah.
Because they're doing exactly what we don't want them to do.
Yeah. So I stay over here.
No, that's good shit.
Oh.
I'll say something. Yeah, it's like a contradiction, right? Elected official comes to one of our meetings and here's the problems and is like, well, why don't you come to the meetings? We go to the meetings, they ignore us. You know, they don't want to listen. They downplay what we say. They dismiss us. They're rude to us. So it's like, why put faith in that? And that's not to say we shouldn't go to the meetings. I mean, like, we go to every city council meeting, regardless of if they're rude to us or not. But like, at the same time, I don't think we need to put excess faith or optimism into the elected officials.
Yeah.
For prime reasons that Stokel pointed out. You killed it. Nail on the head.
So I like what we're building here. So to Stokel's point, right? We're playing a game in which they set the rules, right? So, and think about it like this: if you have a child and they go to basketball tryouts and then they go to soccer tryouts, they're obviously not very good at basketball, but they're killing it at soccer. Do you continue to send them to basketball practice, or do you put them in soccer? So, my point there is saying this: we don't have to keep playing a game in which we don't like the rules. And I think that's one of the things that people don't understand when it comes to the system and when it comes to the power that we have. I think that at the very least, the one thing you can always control is the things that you have the choice in participating. And I think that a lot of times people feel like there are no other options, like there are no other alternatives, and that's the goal with the system. The system makes you feel like, well, this is the only path forward, right? And they do that in many different ways. A lot of times through violence, right? You do anything different, we're gonna beat you, shoot you, throw you in prison, right? You're gonna lose your job. You know, all these different things. And I think one of the things that we have to realize is that when it comes to trying to do something different, when it comes to change, especially when you're having to deal with systemic change, you know, the path to the alternatives is not pretty, and it comes with a lot of sacrifices, right? And I think that, you know, to the point that Luke made earlier, you know, when you're trying to take class consciousness and turn it into class solidarity, right? You're trying to take awareness, turn it into action. A lot of the times we have to realize that there are going to be sacrifices and consequences that come with that. And those are the things that building community and building solidarity helps protect you from. A lot of people, you know, a lot of the ways in which, you know, we're told to go about doing things is in a way in which, like, it's very, not to say that your individual efforts don't matter, but the system overemphasizes individual action over collective action, right? Like you show up to the meeting, you go out and vote, you know what I'm saying? It's always like you, and not nobody's really emphasizing the collective, right? What if the collective, like all of us sitting here right now, right? If we were all to say there's one issue that we're really concerned about, and we devise a strategy and a plan to act on this issue in a collective manner, not just, you know, one person going up and talking at, every city council meeting, whatever the case may be, or whatever. Like one of the things that I've said ever since I came back to ball in Milledgeville is that, when it comes to the local politics, the problem is the fact that there is no new generation of leadership. The same people are going to run for the same positions over and over and over again, a lot of times running uncontested, and then we're expecting different results out of these folks. If we are all sitting here saying that this is an issue that we have with our elected officials, we need to start finding new people to run. And collectively building up that person has to be accountable to the collective. Their platform has to reflect the wants and the priorities of the collective, and then we have to make sure that that person is voted in and then held. That's the only way you hold somebody accountable. They have to be accountable to you before the election happens, right? If they're not accountable to you prior to that point, you're not gonna get leverage with them after you've already voted them in. All right, and so everybody's kind of like looking at what happened in New York and like saying, "Oh, we need that to happen throughout the rest of the country." Mamdani was accountable to an organization prior to being elected mayor. You know, I'm not sure what his and somebody else may be able to fill me in what his affiliation with DSA was with prior. I know he was council member or something, like a representative from one of the boroughs prior. So I don't know if he was, part of the DSA collective, how far going back, but he was accountable to the people that got him elected before he was elected. Yeah. And so that is something that I think that we have to start to understand and really start to develop as a community, is that if we want things to change, we have to be accountable to ourselves, and then somebody who is going to be accountable to us needs to be put in office. But we need something different. It can't be the same thing, right? You gonna say add something?
Didn't mean to interrupt you. Yeah.
Oh, you're gonna go like
No, I'll go.
Okay,
Yeah,
go ahead.
I just was gonna pull it back a moment to choosing not to play in the system. I mean, I think part of the realization is what problems that to solutions, and who are they solutions for?
Right.
Like, which of the problems we're facing would someone listening on city council be able to make a difference for? Like, is there a specific pot of money that we want to be directed somewhere else? That's something that sits in their face, but there feels like there's a lot of things that, like, we don't have to get somebody elected in order to distribute a very narrow set of funds within the city in order to start providing more food in the community. And in fact, it's going to be hard to get somebody on city council to make that happen. That's the playing within that is maybe leaving that aside.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to point out illustration of what kind of Luke's talking about is I mean, I'm not blaming the city council. I think nationwide we have this problem where we put all social and any kind of issue or social problem, like the emergence of a new drug, as a responsibility of the police. And that's why I was at city council last week, because it's my concern, right, that the police already have too much power. But here we go with leaders of our city saying, well, we don't have the money for this. And I'm like, wait a minute, isn't the Milledgeville Police Department paid by the city? So I think it's also just not just talking about consciousness, but urging our public officials to think differently, because they've been ingrained, from children through even their experience in the system, to think about it as it has to happen this way. We have to have a police department, and that's just an illustration of what he's saying. It's like,
well, they'll say they don't have money. And I'm like, but you do, you just haven't thought about it in a different way ever. And, again, not on them. That's how we're socialized, right? So I don't know if that, I don't know, maybe I have left field, but I just feel
No, I get what you're saying, and I think that's part of the discussion we're having in the sense that it's like, at least for me, and to kind of touch on both of your points, that to me, I'll say this: electoralism is less of a solution and more of a strategy, right? Because I think that if for example, if you have a city council that is more favorable to the work that the new Vanguard does, for example, and let's say, with all the craziness that's going on in federal administration saying, left wing ideologies, terrorism, right? I think that it helps a little bit to have people at least that are closer to you in proximity when it comes to electoral politics that are favorable to the things that you're doing and what you want, right? So it's not so that when if the governor or the president called and said we're sending troops down there, they're not going to be like, oh yeah, sure, bring them in, all right? Because we also don't like what these people are doing. So it's not it's less of a solution and more of a precaution in my eyes. But also, and to your point, I think that you know I think yes, we want to be able to help our elected officials think differently, but I don't think it's going to be the ones that are currently in power. And I think that's kind of the point that is being made is that we need people that are already coming in with a different mindset, not that are already there and then we're trying to change their minds and they already have the position because there's no leverage in that. So they have all the leverage. I'm already elected.
We all know change is hard for us.
Right,
It's hard
exactly.
for them too.
So it's like I'm already in this position. Nobody's probably gonna run against me. Why should I change my mind anyway? So I think that ultimately, I think the point that I'm making, and maybe it's a little bit long winded, is that there has to be a credible threat to power to respond in the ways that we want it to respond. And so, if nobody's challenging somebody's seat, they have no reason to change their mind on anything, right? Yes.
Yeah, like to piggyback off what you're saying, like electoralism being a strategy, like not like a path to liberation. I think, like also going back to what Sophie said about the petition, like all of the petition, like everyone was saying it was not like the right path to choose. If there were like more, let me be nice. Let me not say confident. Let's try to be better word. If they were people who were thinking long term, they could have thought about historically what had happened with these kind of like electoral like petition type things and saw like foreseen that it was not going to get passed and then use that as leverage to bring all those 100,000 of people that signed a petition and bring them into something. But because the organization building is never prioritized in movement, there's nothing to bring people in. It's always like how many people can we bring in a room, and that's it. So while like these strategies are useful, they're only useful as far as you have the capacity to do those things. So like how much time and money does it take to put someone into office? A lot. So a lot of door knocking, a lot of like flyers have to be made, like speeches, like someone has to write these speeches, they have to like get the suits, like it's a whole thing. So it's like understanding where like I don't know Milledgeville like that, but like understanding what Milledgeville needs, like where the people are at cost consciously, like does it make sense for where Milledgeville is at to have a campaign to put someone in office? It might be because it might raise people's class consciousness. It might give people involved in something like tangible that they can like feel. Like the whole Mondani campaign, it got a lot of people, like what 70,000 volunteers or whatever. Like that's a lot of people involved in politics. I don't know where they're at now, but let's say like there was a better strategy here. There was a more something to bring them into. But that could be something that builds the capacity of whatever collective you guys have here, like the new Vanguard, could have more members from that campaign, and then after the campaign, realizing that one person in office is not going to be able to change much, but it might be a galvanizing thing to see. Oh, we put so much time and effort into this, and yet things are still not changing. We need to try something else. But it's hard to capitalize off that because then it can also be like, oh, nothing's changed, therefore we don't try anything ever again.
Right.
Yeah, and I think when it comes to redirecting that energy and like the accountability of politicians in office, it also shows in terms of the conversation of class consciousness, the limitations that bring. Like even in the Mondani administration where it seems like the most progressive that we've had in the US in a long time, like he still had to walk a lot of things back. Like he started the sweeps again and he apologized to the NYPD and he went back on his promise and was gonna defund the public library. Like these are things that I think a lot of people tend to just be like, oh, well, can't you just see the positive these things? And it's not to discount the positive things that he's doing, but it just shows the limitations of how much even the most progressive in our eye candidate, that even if we got a Bongani, like aligned candidate in every state in the US, that won't change because they're all like agents of the state that in the system that we're working in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But that would reflect such an organization having been produced to produce that outcome that we would hope for outcomes besides who those people are.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that and I agree very much with everything that's being said. And I think that that's a lot of the positioning that we come from as well. I mean, anyone here that's part of the new Vanguard will tell you how many times we've been approached to run for office, and I've told people it just would be a waste of resources. One, I mean, I'd rather put all that money and time into our community garden, for example, than to put it towards an electoral campaign, right? One thing that I also talk about is that when it really comes to like building power, there are like people can organize themselves and build power, right? People you can organize a people's council, and address the things that are going on in your community. It doesn't you don't always have to run to the city council or the county commission, especially when they're not receptive to what is being brought up before them. I mean, and we have examples of this being done, and I think that the thing that the thing that a lot of people maybe why a lot of people may be reluctant or why a lot of people have fear is the consequences that come with it, and a lot of people are hesitant about their capacity to deal with those consequences. And I think that that's where the aspect of solidarity and building community and building strong organizations comes into place. Because when you are making progress, there are going to be attacks on the things that you're doing. We have a direct example of that when we're putting together our people's platforms, and we were bringing forth these issues and having conversations, and then like next thing I know, there's calls being made around saying that, oh, this is a communist group, like you guys want to be associated with that. But what people don't realize is that we had put in so much work beforehand that nobody's gonna listen to that.
Right.
Because who is gonna show up if not us? Who is going to show up at your food pantries? Who's going to show up to organize with you and do these things that when we show up, we're the only people there, right? And again, that's, and so it comes to a point where, again, moving consciousness into solidarity is that it takes action. It takes, putting boots on the ground and being in the spaces where people need you, and where we need each other, so that when those attacks do happen, because at first a lot of times it'll first start with people trying to discredit the work that you're doing, right, and painting a certain picture of it. And the way in which you prevent that is that people have to be intimately familiar with your politics, not just on a theoretical level, but on a practical level. And this is important because I remember, before I moved back, and I was telling a friend of mine about, everything all the visions that I had to do, and talking about socialism. They're like, well, you can't go down to Milledgeville talking to people about socialism. And it's like, well, I'm not gonna go down there and talk about it. I'm gonna go down there and do it, and people are gonna see what this looks like, right? And so that's and that's what I mean by having people having intimate like familiarity. They don't not just knowing the words that are associated with your politics, but the actions and the outcomes. People, we have to give people something tangible to be able to hold on to, and to aspire for more, right? And it has to be, you have to make it like addicting, right? Like the reason I'm so passionate about this is because I know what this looks like. I do the work, right? I show up, and I've seen what it looks like when people come together to make things happen. And that feeling of like the little bit of freedom that you get each step of the way it's freeing, it's addicting. You want to, how do we do this bigger and better, right? And so we have to make that contagious and to other people. And I think that that's one of the things that when it comes to building class solidarity and the action steps, that a lot of times organizations might drop the ball because they want everybody to understand it up here. And the problem is that, like, although the human species has been on Earth for however many hundred thousands, close to millions of years, um, our mental capacity has only evolved so much, and that's something that we have to realize. Most people have to touch it and see it and feel it to believe it, and that's just a function of the human brain, right? That's why you don't have a bunch of like quantum physicists running around. Like the human mind has not reached a point where like we can on a mass level can all be quantum physicists. It's a very like hard thing to grasp, right? So people have to be able to see these things. You have to give people tangible wins, and a lot of times that's why people go for electoralism, because it's easy to get somebody elected and see we got this person in office, but then you have to do the work of you know um, keeping them accountable and making sure that they deliver on their platform and their promises. And so, that's a big part of what our work is as organizers and as people that care about our community and building that solidarity. And it's not, it doesn't have to be something as big as building a community garden, but like you all said, just starting with getting to know your neighbors. There's so many people that don't know who lives next to them, right? So if something happens to you, like, or, if something happens to you, not just to you, don't even think about yourself. If something happens to your neighbor, like, can you help them? Would you even know that something's happened to them? And so, just those little things that we can do, and it's the little changes that we make in our everyday lives, right? I think we a lot of times we undervalue the little things that we can do to change, sort of the ways in which we interact with each other in our society, that lead to us having greater capacity to do the big things, in our lives. Um, and so just in that, like, in this next part, just want to engage on what that looks like, throughout this conversation as we've engaged with these different questions and these different ideas. What does it look like for us to move beyond the idea of class consciousness, but into real class solidarity, into action steps, the things that, we can do. Who wants to keep that on?
One thing that really helps is like there's a lot of ways that people are organizing or resisting to stuff right now, and one of the main things is look, you just show up. Like if someone's doing an anti-ICE demonstration or something, like if you can, like risk levels are pushing for it, just show up and talk to people. Because if you want to meet the type of people who are going to show up for you or show up as things get worse or whatever, you're going to find them doing the thing that right now is low key out of everyone. Seems like it's out of everyone's way to do. Like if it's a ICE thing and it's a trans rights like thing, like just showing up to events and having those discussions and making those connections and networking, like low key networking is key. Um, that's what you need to do. That's how you meet those people. That's how you build that capacity. Because capacity is not just an individual thing; it's a collective thing. You can work on one while leaving another, but I think the best way to do it is at the same time, like build that collective capacity while you're building your individual capacity. And you don't really find ways to do that without kind of taking that first step to go to things. So I think meetings like this, like, that's a really great example of what we need to see more of. So a lot of people, I think, have the idea that they're gonna somehow tough it out as things get worse by themselves. Like the preppers, like to an extent, I'm prep pilled sometimes. I'm like, oh, I need to get go back. I'm also like, knowing me, I got about 2 weeks in the apocalypse from like I don't want to do this anymore. And if I had other people who I was accountable to and like who were like helping me in that process, I'd be much less likely to just give up. So that's one thing that's super great is just go to people's events because it takes time, money, and effort to do these things, and we don't want the people who do host events to get that burnout. We need to be, I think, consistently nourishing those who are setting up spaces, putting in effort because like you said, it's long term. This is long term stuff. We're not about to be done with this stuff in the next few years. It's going to be decades. The history of revolutionary struggle is measured in decades, if not centuries. So we're in for the long haul, but you got to find people and become the type of people who can do the long haul stuff. And it's one thing to say, it's another thing to actually like practice it and build that capacity. So I think you start by actually going to events and getting to know people. Neighbors is great too, but sometimes your neighbors are Republicans. You know, well, I was gonna say no offense to Republicans.
All offense.
Okay. But in those places, you find the people who like are just more likely to treat you as a human, to adopt kind of the outlook that we're in this together because they're already putting in the work to prove that they want to be together with other people and doing something. So I think that's a great start.
Yeah, kind of building off of that, the networking point is really important. And also, like you were saying, people, they will take on struggle. They will, you know, improve their interests like on their own. They'll figure out a way. And as you're going to all these events and these networking, finding those like leaders that are representatives of those groups and really bringing them into common work, like people here. Like I'm sure you guys are some of the more vocal and care a lot more about a lot of these political issues and maybe some people around you. Finding those people who are dedicated and willing to do the work and give them something to do so that they can continue building themselves and connecting with the community and expanding outwards. That's also really important. Like you were mentioning, capacity is more than an individual thing. So the capacity of the organization also has to grow and bring those people in.
Can I say something? I just want people for food for thought. There's loopholes in everything. It just depends on how long you're willing to dig for the loopholes. But there's loopholes in everything. So things that can't be done at that point, that's because they don't have time to do it. But it's loopholes in everything. And Baldwin County, Milledgeville, we are the legs that need to overturn the table. We need to start in Baldwin County. I don't know how, but I know you're talking about decades. I don't have decades. I have now. I would like to see something happen between now and maybe next year. Something seriously. And the people will have to be involved. And so if we are, and maybe not like a New York thing, but this stuff has to stop. And if you don't feed into the system, what can they do?
Take it like that.
Yeah.
Flip it over. Stop being a bitch. Flip it over. That's just me. That's not.
I agree. I agree. And then to your point, that's a lot of people have that. There is an urgency about things that need to be done right now. And so the thing with that is it's just about uh how much people are willing to because there's a lot that can get done in a short period of time. It's just about how many sacrifices are you willing to make to see those things happen. And I think that is one of the difficulties when because one of the reasons why we started this organization particularly is that there is decades long gaps between um, organizing sort of like strategies in this country. I think that there's those decade long gaps. People got very comfortable because the system made them comfortable, right? There was people were making a lot of money and spending a lot of money, and everything was looking good, right? Capitalism was really doing its thing. And then it started doing its thing, so, so it's like we lost a lot of those traditions and foundations that were built, and from literally the beginning of this country all the way up to like the 1980s, where people were really making a lot of sacrifices to see more immediate results because they understood that there are a lot of people that can't wait and are not willing to wait. And I think that to your point, there are a lot of people now that think that, well, if we just tough it out until Orange Man is out of office, we'll be okay, right? But you don't know, somebody worse than him could be right behind him. So I think that's also a big part of why it's important to bring people into real work, things that are producing results on a day-to-day basis. Like for me, having a community garden where we are harvesting every week and taking it to the food pantry, to the community fridge. To me, that's at least there's somebody that possibly could not have eaten today that can now eat today because we did that, right? And so that is for me like the ways in which I can do something that's more immediate while also working on the long term. So it doesn't have to be an either or. We have to as George Jackson says, we have to be concerned with people's everyday needs, right? Food, clothing, housing, and all these things. And the overturning of the system is a more long term thing. But you can't. It's hard to organize hungry people, right? It's hard to organize people that are overworked and stressed, right? And we see that, right? Because people already can't show up to city council meetings. What makes us think they're gonna show up to the revolution if they, you know what I mean? Like that is so it's part of that where like the responsibility falls on those of us who have started the work to help break everybody else's chains, right? Once you get your chains off, now you have to be, break the chains off of other people and make sure that they're able to, because many hands make light work. So the work that feels heavy right now eventually will feel light once we continue to make that progress. And I think that is, and I use the community garden as an example because for me, I had that same mindset as you, where I needed to see. So I'm that kind of person. I need to see something as I'm doing this work, and so creating the community garden was my way of creating something that somebody can come and see. You see today this tomato plant wasn't there, and then the next day there's a tomato plant, and then a few months later there's tomatoes, right? And it's like, and we know that we're doing this to help feed each other, feed our community, but also in the creation and the maintaining of the community garden. And Luke said something to me, a couple months ago in a conversation that made me really realize how special what we do with the community garden is because you know we talk about capitalism and class consciousness and the ways in which we can change these things. And really, ultimately, what we're trying to build is a society in which people's livelihood is not dependent on how much money they have, right? And so, with the community garden, um, you know, we haven't received any large donations. We haven't received any grants. We haven't. Nobody wrote us a big fat check. You know what I'm saying for the community garden. But what people have done is show up. People have showed up to plant. People have show up to harvest. People have showed up to build things. People have given their time, their resources, and their expertise to the garden, and it has grown and will continue to grow. And we've maintained it for these past 2 years. You started new gardens, and all these things. And so and Luke said to me that if what we're hoping to build is a society that is not dependent on money, the best way to do that is to start practicing it now, right? And so that's what we're doing with the garden is to say, I don't tell anybody to donate to the garden. I just ask them to show up if you can show up and give to the garden what you can give. And so that has made my work as the founder and manager of the garden a lot easier because I know that when I show up on those days, I'm not the only one there, right? There was like a couple of months where it was just me, but then Liam started to show up, and then he started to bring his friends, and then word started getting out to the community, and the community members started to show up, and so that's why I say like we have to show people what this looks like, because people ask me all the time, oh, like, because even at first I didn't even want to make the garden a nonprofit, right? Because people would tell me, you make it a nonprofit so people can donate and it'll be a tax write off and da da da. And it's like that's really not my philosophy behind this work, and it's not it's not I don't want to attract funds or money. I want to bring in people, right? I'd much rather have 100 people at the garden than one person write us a check for $1,000. Right. That is the goal because once we get them there, we can have these conversations and we're doing the work and we're building those relationships and that solidarity. Because that's what ultimately this is about. Writing checks is not going to change much of what we're dealing with. Because then that check's get written and now I have to do all these reports and these tax. I don't want to do that. You know what I'm saying? I don't want to do that. I want to build real solidarity with people. And
hired labor.
Right, you know what I mean? Now we gotta have a board of directors and all this other stuff. It's like that's not what we're about. So I think that I'm very proud of the fact that we've been able to really put that philosophy into practice. And thank you to all of you all that continuously show up because without you all, the garden wouldn't be around. We wouldn't be able to keep having these meetings and the work that we're doing. And that gives me real hope in the fact that this can grow and turn into something. And I mean, to the point where it's like, even this year I've had 3 or 4 people who are running for office reach out to us to ask us to be a part of their campaigns. And after that, we don't. That's not what we do. But like, you should go talk to the people. You should really figure out And not only that, but like you should go build with people, right? Don't just have listening sessions with people to say, "Oh, I'm gonna put your concerns on my platform. I'm gonna make it a part of my thing," and then then nothing, right? It's like people don't see you in the community. You're not hands on, or whatever. So it's really about, I think that as we continue to do this, people, the people in power can see when power is shifting, right? To your point, that's why they're trying to consolidate power, right? To prevent the power base from shifting. So when they see that power is shifting, they're gonna try to redirect it in their direction, right? And again, it's gonna start with the small things, trying to discredit your movement, this, that, and the third. And when they see that that's not working, that's when they resort to force, and that's when they resort to the violence. And so we also have to be thinking about protecting each other in this work that we do. And I think that I think once people feel like they can be protected in the work, I think that we are going to start seeing a large number of people come into these spaces. Um, and that's why it's important for us to read books. That's why it's important for us to learn about other organizations that have done this work in the past. I read about a lot about organizations like the Black Panther Party and the Black Liberation Army and things like that. And the reason why in the 60s and 70s people were flocking to these organizations is because they felt protected by these organizations, right? They felt that if the police came in our neighborhoods or whatever the case may be, this is an organization that has shown the willingness to protect the people it's trying to organize. Um, our politicians have not done that. Our politicians will allow you to be brutalized and beat by the police, and ICE will come in your city and shoot you, and the National Guard will occupy your city, and they'll let businesses come in and exploit their residents as workers, and like all of these things. And so it's like we have to, again, once people see who has their best interest at heart, the power base will shift, right? And so that's the work that we have to do, and that's the work that we're trying to do. Um, as the new Vanguard, but with the community, right? It's not I feel like we're not presenting ourselves as the one organization that's going to do it. We're just a bunch of people that got together and said, we're gonna move as an organization, but ultimately we have to move as community more importantly than anything. And so those are the things that I think will really kind of move us, beyond just the consciousness aspect, but into the solidarity aspect. Is once people are being taken care of, people are being protected, and then using that capacity and that energy into building something different. And to y'all's point, not relying on the system that has continuously failed us, time and time again. Because the more we keep participating in it, the more legitimacy we give it, right? And that is what we don't want to do, right? It is, we have to start destroying the legitimacy of the system, and people have to start seeing it as an illegitimate, system, and that this is not a system that serves people, but rather serves, the interests of businesses and all these things. And for me, like I just look at it with, in Bone County and Milledgeville, it's like, we get more hotels, we get more fast food restaurants, we get more dialysis centers, liquor stores. I mean, how is any of this serving people? Right? How's plasma donation?
We don't need that.
It's like, who is this really serving? It's not creating living wage jobs, right? It's not like helping anybody get more affordable housing or eat better or have more access to food. None of these things, right? So again, it's like politicians and anybody else can tell you anything, but look at your material reality and look at the decisions that are being made, and that will tell you where people's interests are. So that's my little spill on that. uh, so, did anybody want to add anything else to the question of how we move beyond, consciousness and into solidarity? We've heard, organizing, right, building strong organizations. We've heard building community again, so showing up. And the other thing I'll say is you can't have strong class consciousness or solidarity if you are also a racist, a homophobe, all these other things where you are, looking down on other people who are also oppressed. You can't, because these people also share class interests with you, and ultimately, if you have more loyalty to the oppressor than the oppressed, you're going to betray your class interests, right? And that's what we've seen, particularly with working class a lot of working class white people, but even some people within oppressed communities that go on to gain a certain amount of influence or wealth, right? We talk a lot about you think about capitalists. A capitalist can come in any color, right?
Right.
So and that is someone that is actively betraying their own community, you know, for power and money or whatever the case may be. So that's something else, like class solidarity comes with deconstructing a lot of these, bigoted and oppressive notions that we have been sort of socialized with as you grow up in a society like this one here. That's all I wanted. So just to kind of close this out, ultimately, the purpose of us having this meeting and all the other meetings we have is again not just to come together and talk about these things, but really, bringing people into the space and, like you said, moving them into active work. And I think, luckily, almost everybody that I know in this room also shows up outside of these conversations, whether it's to the garden or to housing, meetings or whatever the case may be. Everybody here is doing something, and I want you all to applaud yourselves for that because that is really the real work that matters. So give yourself a hand. Um, but as relating to this conversation specifically, I also want you all to take you know everything that has been said in this discussion and in this conversation, um, moving forward, really building those relationships and figuring out how it is that you can contribute to the collective and what real solutions begin to look like. We have literature that we bring at every one of our meetings, but also we do our political education book club, we do the garden, we do a lot of several aspects of volunteer service in our community. But ultimately, what we want to do is really organize the community. And so that's something that I want everybody to really take home with them and bring back into the space. And the next time, you're coming to one of our events or activities or something we're doing, bring somebody new with you if you can, because that's, it has to be a sort of, each one teach one sort of mentality, until we've gotten as many people this we're spilling out of this room the next time, that we have one of these meetings and that we can really present a real alternative to what it is that people are having to lean on currently. So with that said, anybody want to share any closing thoughts?
I just had a question, Fidelis. What are the volunteer opportunities that the Vanguard is a part of, other than the garden?
So I can speak to what I do most often. So first we have the garden. We also have every Thursday, myself, Liam, and Elle, when she's available, we go to New Beginnings Ministry. They have a pantry that is they operate on Tuesdays and Thursdays, so we usually go in the morning time to help them set up the pantry as well as, you know, pick any other sport produce and stuff like that. And we also have a garden out there that we started and maintain as well.
And where's the garden and what time for the new beginning?
New Beginning is 200 Southside Drive, southeast. Um, yeah, and I usually go Thursdays 9:30 a.m. That's when we usually go and volunteer. But like I said, they operate on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So if a different day works better, you may be able to coordinate that with them as well.
And I guess do please tell me about the garden. Or what are y'all are out there on Saturdays?
Our garden? Yes.
Yeah, your garden.
Yeah, Saturdays, evening time, usually at 5:30 ish.
5:30.
Yeah, I usually out there for a couple of hours. So those are our current summer hours when the sun is not beating us overhead.
Blazing.
Yeah. But I also every Tuesday I mentor at the YDC, which is the youth they call it the youth development center now, but it's the juvenile center. So I mentor volunteer there every Tuesday. Then they're always looking for more people to come into the facility and uh, work with the young men in there. So you do have to do like background check and all that other stuff. But it's something I had always wanted to do, just because when it comes to the system, a lot of times we forget about people that are in the system, whether it be adults in the prison or juveniles, and we have to also see incarcerated folks as our community, because a lot of them are, you know, most of us have broken a law on one day or another. You know what I mean? So, and a lot of people that are, in the system are usually there on nonviolent offenses. Uh, Juveniles, they're usually there off of, a bad decision that just, cost them that day. Um, so it's something that's also very just near and dear to my heart, because a lot of people don't go into over to the YDC to mentor, and most of the time they're just sitting in there looking at those four walls, and so having some outside interaction and somebody that can relate to them as people and not inmates is important. As well. So that's something that I do, and then usually during the school year, I'll volunteer with the schools as well. I This past semester I was volunteering at Lakeview Academy. I was doing like tutoring with the second graders. So there's communities in schools as well that's they're if you want to volunteer with kids, you can apply through communities and schools, and of course they do background checks and all that stuff as well. Am I forgetting anything?
Elle and I also go to First Presbyterian Church
Yes.
for their food pantry.
Okay.
On Mondays we usually are over there at like 4:15 to pack the bags. And then on Tuesdays at 9:30 is when we distribute bags.
Also on Saturdays, typically it kind of changes, but we'll go out to the New Beginnings Garden and kind of water and do stuff between like 10 and 10:30, and then directly after that we'll go over to Creekside. We're kind of starting to get into their garden a little bit too.
Yeah.
Very impressive.
We try.
I have a quick question. Is there like a WhatsApp group or something for people to know what's going on or different opportunities?
We usually send them out to our email group. Starting a chat group could be a good idea. For those who are interested. You still get our emails, right? Okay. So that might be something to.
You post on Instagram. That's another way.
Yeah, we're on Instagram and Facebook now as well. So we try to keep people updated through those. Chat group might also be a good way to keep.
Especially because then other people who aren't like part of the leader, like if someone is just going to do something, they could text a group.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, that's something to consider as well.
Well, yeah, and then also, like as communities, like we had her friend come and help us move furniture the other day. You couldn't do it. It would be nice if
That's great.
I had a pickup truck. If someone needs a dresser moved, I'm just probably sitting on the couch, so I can go and move a dresser or something like that. As far as building community and actually like, being there.
Yeah, sure. No, we appreciate that. Yeah, we definitely need pickup trucks on several occasions for our garden.
You're gonna regret that
one. But any other closing thoughts or questions? Thank you all for showing up and for this very exciting conversation. As many of you said, it just starts with showing up, and being out there with community, but also, let's be intentional about organizing and bringing people into the space, because although, all of y'all may not belong to the new Vanguard officially as members, I think that the new Vanguard in spirit, the idea of creating something different and doing something different within, communities where people have just been doing the same thing over and over again. I see all of you as my new Vanguard comrades. So definitely continue to show up. We appreciate you all showing up and all that you all have done to contribute to our work. And if nobody has anything else, we'll close out. All power to the people.
All power to the people.
All right, thank you.
All right.